Hello, hello. Welcome. Day Drinking with David back again. Very excited to be joined by my friend Jay from New Riff, the fabulous distillery in Northern Kentucky. We're going to take a walk around and then taste some product, talk about what makes New Riff so special. I think Jay's coming up right here. Hope everybody's doing well. Very excited to be back. We've got some really, really fun stuff to taste. And always excited to visit Kentucky when we can. I think Jay's here. Go live.
Riff, here we go. Decline. We'll be back. Going live with New Riff here. We are going live. New Riff. Send request. Voila. It should. There we go. Jay. Oh, you're back in the lab. How are you?
I am, yes. There's a tour has popped up. How conveniently.
Oh, perfect. Then we'll keep our schedule.
Well, this one apparently is 4:30, so I thought we would kick off with. And anyway, why wait to taste a whiskey? Let's get.
I'm with you, man.
We could kick off with tasting. I usually start with bourbon and then go to rye, but today, why don't we start with rye? And I'll explain why in a minute.
All right.
We'll just jump right into a whiskey and start talking. Hello, David.
Hello, Jay.
Great to see you again.
Same here, man. How have you been?
Been all right. We're making progress here in the flyover country.
Well, I don't want to fly over Kentucky. I want to fly to Kentucky, by the way. Kentucky's the new Napa. Haven't you heard?
It is.
I'm wondering, though, can you... Oh, my dogs. Can you tell us a little about New Riff? Some people may not know why you exist, what you exist, where you exist, and all that good stuff. So tell us a little bit about the distillery.
Well, we are New Riff Distilling. We are, as it says on the back of the bottle, a new riff on an old tradition. There's a picture of the building. It ain't no shack, and it ain't your grandpappy's barn either.
Right.
We were founded in 2014. We started distilling June of 14, so we've been at this about 7 years. And we make Kentucky sour mash whiskey, a lot of bourbon, and quite a lot of rye. As proportionally speaking, typical to Kentucky, we make a lot more rye than most places. Make also gin and a variety of what we could call, for want of a better term, specialty whiskeys, which are slowly trickling out into the world. In fact, this very week we have a release in Kentucky only for the moment of our 100% malted rye.
Wow.
It's 6 years old, our first really older whiskey, and man, it's great. We're going to get some out to you guys in the fourth quarter. So these specialty things come out as well from time to time.
Very cool. Very cool. And you're one of the few people in this industry, on the production side that has significant experience on the retail side, of course.
Right.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about your history. You're few and far between the people who have done both sides of the street here, and it's something that we've always really appreciated about New Riffs, that you get retail in a way that a lot of brands don't. So I don't know, I'm going to tell us a little bit about your history and how you got involved.
Yeah. Well, so when you visit here soon, David, you'll see next door to us a very large liquor store. It's called the Party Source and was founded in 1993 by an amazing entrepreneur named Ken Lewis. And it's a Titanic store. It may again now be the country's largest. I'm not sure. It's one of the very physically largest stores. Anyway, I went to work for Ken in 2001, and I did your job for him in Kentucky, and with all the distilleries at our door, as it were. So I was the fine spirits manager there, and between Ken the entrepreneur, and me, the sort of creative whiskey side of it, we somehow thought it would be a great idea if we did it ourselves. And built a distillery in the parking lot. And oh, by the way, you have to sell the store because you can't own that and a distillery. So Ken sold the Party Source to his employees. It's now an employee-owned store, and they're right next door. So I don't have to go far for for my Budweiser. Yeah, and that's where we came from. So yes, we love us some bartenders and on-premise too, but we have indeed built this brand differently than many liquor brands get built, where they go into marketing and to brand building. On-premise, get to the bar, build it in the bars, and then people will buy it in the store. And we knew that retailers can build brands because that's what we did. Right?
Yeah.
We built all kinds of brands at the Party Source, exclusive things to us, and searching the world far and wide for rare things and special stuff, just like you guys do there at K&L. So yeah, we have a lot of sympathy, a lot of exposure. We know how retailers think and how to approach them. So, and often as not, we've had friends in the retail business. We have friendly bartenders too, but when I was ready to get into a store in XY city, we just called up the good store there that we knew and said, "Are you ready?" And here we go.
Oh yeah. Well, it shows. I mean, and I think one thing that's great from a retail perspective is because you really are dealing with the most advanced clientele, the people who, especially the store like Party Source and K&L, where you have these people, and you need obviously to appeal to create a product that appeals to a lot of people. But you've been able to sort of really straddle the line, creating stuff that appeals to the geek as well as the everyday drinker and is in a reasonable price point. And I think a lot of people often talk about New Riff as a craft distillery, quote unquote. But in a lot of ways, right, I think you've taken the best of what the legacy distillers have done and the best of the craft distillers and put it out there in a really exciting and new way. The other thing, of course, being, we love the single barrel thing. We love the cask strength thing. And that's something that brands are always like working up toward. And you guys were like, we're ready. We know you want I'm sure you didn't start with a single barrel cask strength, or maybe you did. I don't know. But we were ready. And that was something that I think is really important for brands to have these products available for the trailblazers, the forward-looking drinkers. So I really commend you on that side.
We got into the single barrels within about a couple of months of releasing Bottled and Bond, and it actually took us a while to realize that we would do single barrel. We didn't start distilling day one and say, all right, 4 years till the first single barrel. We let it happen naturally and organically, but eventually realized, you fools, of course we have to do a single barrel. Of course we have to do private barrels, because we did so much of that at the Party Source. We had a rich program that they still do at the store. We launched major brands' private barrel programs. We dug into the distilleries and pulled rare stuff out. We did our own experimental things. And so how could we not take a program and try and do justice to it and really do it right? So once again, when you can visit, you will see the full effect of the
I'm very excited. So yeah, go ahead. Let's taste.
This is our Bottled and Bond rye whiskey, and I should add, everything we make is bottled and bond, with the exception of the single barrels, which cannot be because they're barrel proof. And so a bottled and bond, as we know, can only be 100 proof. But this says in the bottle, bottled and bond without chill filtration. These are the flagships, this and the bourbon, as bottled and bond whiskeys. It is a statement of ours to say, we don't do this just because it's a market segment or it appeals to hipster bartenders in San Francisco or something like that. We do it because, as it says on the back label, this is the world's highest quality standard for a brown spirit. Still, since 1897, the world's highest quality standard. So if we really mean it when we say quality has to be right here on our sleeve alongside our DSP number, right? If we really mean that, how can we not bottle everything at the world's highest standard? And so so the grain bill on this, it says it on the back label, is 95% rye, 5% malted rye. So this is our riff on the ubiquitous 95% rye recipe that was crafted at the old Seagram's distillery right here in Greater Cincinnati. For us, it's a little bit of a local tradition to make a 95% rye. I don't know if it will translate on the old Instagram here, but I will show you guys how I like to drink it. And by the way, viewers and friends of New Riff, please drink your New Riff any way you want. Just buy it from us, okay? But that said, I like to drink it with a little bit of water, and maybe you can see these oils swimming around in the glass there. Smoothness you can see.
Yeah.
It brings additional flavors and aromas out because, of course, it is on chill filter.
Well, and this has become such a sticking point in our industry. And I think, you know, coming from that retail side, and this is the case in any industry, really, you know, when you have the product people in charge, the people who care about the quality of the product, you know, the product speaks for itself. You know, as soon as you let the marketing guys make decisions about the product, then, you know, then you're creating stories and pushing a product into that zeitgeist, or that image that someone's created for you. Here, you don't have to. I mean, you don't really have to say much about it. I mean, you know, everything is in the bottle and on the bottle. You can say a lot about it, but the quality really is so evident in the very essence of what y'all are doing, and it's something that very few people really understand. Like there's a way to do this right, and you guys have really you know, capitalized, I think, on that perfectly. And this smells great. Oh my God, I haven't had this in a little bit. And this, I'm drinking, this is a bottled spring 2020. So we may not be drinking the same exact batch. Do you find there's significant, distilled spring 2016, bottled spring 2020? Do you find there's significant difference in terms of the seasonality of these whiskeys?
Well, the lighthearted answer is if we're doing our job, no. However, as we'll see in the single barrels, we do deal at New Riff with a fair amount of variability from batch to batch. I'll explain why that is, because it's a nice story to talk about single barrels. But we do have to vat these together with considerable care to make sure we're sort of grabbing enough genetic material or enough of the range of flavors that New Riff can get. There's only about 25 to 30 barrels, sometimes 22, that go into a bottling run of New Riff bottled and bond. So if there are some anomalies in there, that maybe a batch is sweeter or spicier or drier or something like that, then those can sometimes have a larger effect on our bottling regimen than on many distilleries. I'll go into more detail when we get to the single barrels. About the seasonality, there's nothing about being distilled in the fall versus being distilled in the spring that is much different. I suppose people say things like, you remember those old time labels that so and so is aged, 7 summers old, and they how many years it was in the, and so on. I suppose, in my opinion, the whiskey definitely ramps up its maturation in the summer. The reason whiskey in Kentucky matures so quickly, besides the obvious fact of the new charred oak barrel, is the fact that compared to a temperate place like Scotland, we are quite hot summer. Whereas in a place like India, where brands like Amrut mature arguably even faster than that, it never cools off. It's always hot there.
Yeah.
So the heat is the driving catalyst, more so than the so-called expansion into the wood and the pulling out of the wood. Yes, that goes on, but it's the fact that we have heat driving chemical reactions, I think, that accounts for a bigger difference. That said, I think if we saw a meaningful difference over a whiskey that was aged for 4 winters and 3 summers versus 4 summers and 3 winters, I think by now that would have become apparent both to New Riff and to the industry wide. So I don't find a lot of difference from one from this season to this. And by the way, I'm fond that people find our tack strip. Of course, this is a nod to the old time bottled and bond productions where it was required, and we put
Right.
it there as an old. In our bottle, there is an inherent tension between the new and the old, and that's inherent in our name, a new riff on an old tradition. And so we wanted the bottle to have some elements that were old, like the embossing, and some elements that were new, like this sleek ombre. But certainly the tack strip is a nod to the old.
The old and the new. I love it. And and there's a lot that the old can teach us. I think that's part of the problem with craft distilling is that people aren't looking at their products holistically, and this in the context of the greater, you're in Kentucky, so you obviously have this incredible context there, but in the context of the greater conversation about what makes good whiskey, oftentimes we see, distillers focusing on the distillate, like, oh, we have a very clean hard cut. You're like, well, but if you go to Scotland and taste the spirit off the still, no, they've got a ton of heads and tails in there because they're expecting to put it in the barrel for 12 years. And it's not this. Some distilleries have very light, pretty spirit, but other ones, you go to Bruichladdich and taste their spirit, it's like pretty funky. And you don't get that at the craft distilleries and doing single malt typically. So,
or in the case of ours, and in the case of these lab samples you see behind me, there is no heads cut.
Right, there you go. There you go.
There's a tails cut, but we in the Kentucky sour mash bourbon regimen, we don't really take a heads cut. It all goes through the column still, and it all goes in the doubler at a certain temperature. And so we put it in the barrel, and Mother Nature and the oak sort it all out, and what comes out is a double gold medal winner.
There you go. Double gold every time. I think, well, and there's this trope about methanol and cutting heads and all this thing. And it's like, if you look at the science, it's kind of BS unless you're making fruit eau de vies or, what have you. I mean, there's very low methanol in any grain
low.
Spirit.
Super duper low.
Unless you screw something up horribly.
A glass of orange juice may have about as much methanol as some of these things do. So
yeah, absolutely.
No, grains simply are not a producer of very much of that alcohol at all.
Well, gosh, this is gorgeous. The texture, the nose. I mean, it has so much classic rye aromatics, and then these other things just sort of wisping around it. This sweetness, that almost orange peel, that orange oil note, and that great green rye nose. Gorgeous stuff.
Thank you. You mentioned the mouthfeel. Perhaps would we go on to the Bottled and Bond bourbon, or step outside to get into our little tour?
It's up to you. I'm game for whatever. Maybe let's do a walk around, because I'd love to talk about production a little bit.
Sure. Let's go for a walk. Now, can I? Yes.
Flip us over. There we go. Easy.
So we opened New Riff with 4 fermenters, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we proceeded to install 5 and 6. We thought we would do this in, year 7 or 8, and we put these babies in month 10.
Wow.
Such was the demand for our product. So here is actually in the fermenters right now is all rye. This is a rye fermentation. This was put in yesterday and will get distilled on Friday. And if we look at another one, come over here, you'll see quite a different look to the top of it. And yet,
look at that.
Look here as we see all of these are at a different state of fermentation.
You hear a lot of distillers complain about the foaminess of rye. I see there's a little bit of a cap there on the edge. Is that really an issue if you're planning, if you know what's going on? Like when does that actually become
Right. It is it can be a problem once in a while. It doesn't happen too often. I'm pleased to say we have some that is coming over the top, but generally we don't have too much of a problem with that. We're very practiced by now at making rye. We do leave a little bit of extra headspace, as you see here.
Mm-hmm.
We also control it with a set of enzymes that help us keep that down. One of them is called firm cap, and it helps to maintain a little bit of steady boy. Don't get out of hand here. Keep some control over the fermentation. We were taught the black art of how to make a 95% rye recipe by the man who invented it at the Seagram's plant, and we're old hands at it by now. In fact,
very cool.
I say all of these these fermenters are full of rye. They're full of rye because on Mondays and Tuesdays we mash rye, and it ferments for 3 days. So we give our rye a 3-day fermentation. That means that on Thursday and Friday, when we mash bourbon, the bourbon is almost always backset with a rye backset. And if you talk to some of the old-time distillers, they will tell you, man, the best bourbon we make is that one that's backset with rye when we make rye 3 days a year, like those big old distilleries do. I think some of them now are up to
batch.
They make a week of rye. Well, we make rye every week,
Yeah.
We almost always are making it on Thursdays and on Mondays.
Sounds like something Jimmy Russell would say.
Exactly, yeah. So we mentioned mouthfeel. I want to show you something neat. It's actually an extremely unsexy piece of New Riff site. Right there is a manhole. You see it?
Yes.
That square of concrete between these two
sir.
cars, that is the top of our well.
Wow.
The first thing we did when Ken Lewis said, let's build this distillery, let's do it, was we went looking for a better source of water than the city of Newport. And we found underneath us, 100 feet down, an aquifer that gives us 500 gallons a minute of fantastic limestone-rich distilling water. That becomes the whiskey. It also provides for a lot of our cooling. So when we have cooling coils in the cooker, for example, here's the 6,000-gallon cooker that boils the corn, and we then cool it down to about 145 degrees to add the malt. That cooling is accomplished by our cold well water. Gorgeous. And so the well water is a tremendous energy saver, as well as giving us fantastic flavored water. We even have a tap here of the water.
Oh, great.
And when you visit, I'll give you a taste, but the water itself has got a lot of character. It's big, it's bold water. You drink, you say, man, that's some really watery water. It's got a lot of hemp. It actually has 4 times the dissolved minerality as most of the city water in the area. So the water, I blame, is primarily responsible for that big New Riff mouthfeel.
Well, I think that's huge. You've had, some of your competitors have spent a lot of money, using water treatment systems to take the local water, purify it, and then remineralize it, which is crazy. But I guess if you can do it in one step, you might as well, right?
No, we relish this fine water supply we have. We would never do anything to it. It's we have it tested annually, and it's good stuff. But it comes right out of the ground and goes in the whiskey.
Great.
So here is our, pardon the noise, we have ventilation fans running in here. This is our fine grains room, and we have silos outside, malt and corn and rye, that go up and go into our grain mill. This is a roller mill, and here we can adjust different settings for different grains. And we run everything through this one mill. We do not have hammer mills. We only have this one roller mill. We also have the ability with this lovely, very boring looking piece of equipment. This is an auxiliary dump trough. Let me back up. You can get a look at it. And we can take a 50-pound bag of grain, like that stuff over there, malted rye, and dump it in, and it goes up and then into the mill. So with this, we can exploit any grain we want. We can put our 5% malted rye in this way. This is how we made our winter whiskey which was chocolate oatmeal stout bourbon.
Wow.
And over here in these 2,000-pound bags, I won't dig into them right now, but these are full of, oh wait, maybe one of them is open. Nope, here I have one kernel. Look at that.
What is that?
That is corn.
Oh,
This is local, Ohio native, grown for us in Indiana, heirloom corn. It's called
that's
Blue
awesome.
Claridge. And we've been distilling this for a few years now, and it's going into a bourbon that will come out someday. But we can take these 2,200-pound super sacks and run those through the auxiliary dump trough. So
Very cool.
we have the capacity here to make any grain bill that we want.
Someone asked a question about the peated backset. I'm sure we'll poke into that. But I'd assume any peated malt is going through that system as well.
Yes, exactly. When we have made peated malted barley, we have run it that way as well. We bring in 2,200-pound bags of peated malt from Scotland.
Wow.
Here is the tower and the glory. 24-inch diameter copper column still from Bourbondom. It is, behind each one of these is a plate. If some of you folks haven't seen how one of these runs, the gist of it is that the beer goes up this stainless steel tube right here, and it goes way, way, way up in the sky to the beer heater, which is that torpedo-shaped object right there. And the beer heater is copper, and it heats the beer, and then it goes into the still. And behind each one of these these sight glasses, there is a tray. I'm not sure you can see the tray right now. I get up close there, can't really see it, but inside there is a tray with 285 little holes in it, and the beer sits on the tray, and it goes across this tray and goes down to the next tray like that. So the beer is stepping down all the way like this, all the way down the still. In the bottom of the still, we are injecting low pressure steam, and that steam goes up through the beer. It catches the alcohol and it turns into an alcoholic vapor, which then goes and is condensed in this tall copper condenser. And then it comes out here in our spirit safe out of that tube, and then goes to the doubler, which is over here. This is the 375-gallon copper doubler, and that goes in there, is redistilled. It sweetens and ripens the flavor, takes it up to about 135 proof, and up this copper line arm goes the vapor into this condenser.
Is the doubler steam injected typically, or
no? The doubler has a steam coil inside it.
Coil. Okay.
Coil. Yeah.
And what proof is it coming off that first run?
About 120 off the beer still, and 135 off the doubler. So
that second distillation just tweaks it up a little bit.
A little bit. It's called a doubler because it's doubling it's two distillations, more so than actually doubling the proof. That's not quite the case.
I love every time I go into a distillery, I'm like, so the doubler is pretty much a pot still connected to the column still. Like, no, they always go like, no, it's not really a pot still. It's not pot still. I'm like, well, it's kind of a pot still. Like, it's an interesting process. This is pretty ubiquitous across Kentucky. This is sort of the standard.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, we do have a pot still. This is our 500-gallon Bourbondom pot still, which primarily makes our gin. We have made whiskey on it, but it mostly does gin. So the doubler. This is the classic setup: a beer still feeding a doubler. Now, pre-Civil War, this technology was not really used in Kentucky. And it wasn't even invented until the 1840s and adopted in the British Isles and Ireland and so on, and later came to Kentucky, really after the Civil War. But for living memory, this is the way you make Kentucky bourbon. And we wanted that classic Kentucky regimen production method and classic flavor and style.
Well, and it's not a massive still, but you can probably produce a significant amount of whiskey. What sort of production is possible on this still?
Right. We make about 40 barrels a day, and that's running 3 shifts from about 6 a.m. to 11 o'clock at night. We could make a little bit more if all of the fermentations were 3 days, and we went to 24/7 production, but we don't want to do that. We like 4-day fermentations, and it's hard on our staff to do that much. So we're quite happy running 4 days a week with 3 batches a day. So every day that we run, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we distill 3 of those fermenters out there and redistill that and fill them up with a new mash. We are, however, expanding, I'm pleased to say, and if I flip my phone again, you can see right out here is the edge of the building. And in this little space right here, we are going to squeeze in 3 more fermenters and increase our production capacity by 50%. That's it. That's all the more we can.
You're going to need another distillery soon enough.
So that is about it. I mentioned, by the way, copper. The entire distillation path of this system is copper. Anywhere that the beer is hot or the spirit is in a vaporous state, we want it touching copper. Even here, this reflux line that carries reflux spirit from the top of the still, that's copper. So we don't mind if it's condensed or if it's beer before distillation, like this line is stainless steel. And every place else is copper. Copper. We wanted it with maximum possible copper contact and taking no chances on that, on how much was enough with something like a stainless steel beer still.
Very cool. Someone's asking again if we can revisit the no head cut thing, which I think it's easier to explain once you've seen the system, but it's not something we often. So you're actually taking 100% of that first distillation from top to bottom, well, not to bottom, but at a certain point you cut it, I assume, around what, 20, 30 proof?
No, I'm happy to talk about it. David, honestly, I love that our visitor, I didn't catch the name there, but I saw it come up on the
Whiskey Badger. He's a regular.
Whiskey Badger, apparently a Wisconsinite. My wife would cheer him on. So it's actually a very complicated topic to get across, and we may not be able to do it justice in this forum here. It's something I almost never talk about. Probably shouldn't have opened my mouth, but it's very complicated to get people to grasp. Many distillers don't even figure it out. Many whiskey experts and writers. I haven't met a writer yet who comprehends what really goes on here. So here is the beer still again. So as I said, the beer goes in the still, it goes down the still, the alcohol goes up and it comes out. There is no opportunity in this to take a cut. It's going in continuously. So unlike a pot still, see the pot still, unlike a pot still where we fill it up with alcohol and it very slowly, let me switch my phone around. This is awkward. Very slowly starts at a low proof and a low temperature and rises like this. And somewhere on that continuum, we can cut it and divert it somewhere else. So there is a difference in a pot still between what's coming off at 176 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the vaporization point of ethanol, versus 185 or 190 or 200 or something like that. There's no opportunity to do that in this kind of a still.
Right, because it comes off the still at 1 proof and it stays that proof until you're done. Is that sort of?
That's right. But furthermore, it goes in at 1 temperature and there's no temperature gradient. So this runs at about 199 degrees. And so we are effectively collecting all the alcohol below that point. And there's a tiny bit of alcohol, like 0.2% or 0.1%. It's called the base loss. There's very, very little left in the stillage. And we don't want any left there, so we make that as minimal as possible. Anyway, that's the first distillation. So there's no cut made there. When it goes into the doubler, it once again goes in continuously, okay? Continuously going in there. And what happens in a doubler is that I had to go back and dig out my high school chemistry to figure out how this stuff works. Remember the adage about to cause a chemical reaction, or in this case, a change of state from a liquid to a vapor, you have to have energy. And that energy, in this case supplied in the form of heat, goes into this equation and changes the state of the alcohol from liquid to a gas. And when that energy is expended and it has accomplished that change of state, the energy is used up. So whereas we add low pressure and not really all that much energy to this still, we have cold 60 degree, approximately 62 degree alcohol coming in from the condensers. And so what we do is run this in a state where we're hitting it with high pressure steam and throwing so much energy, and there's so many BTUs per hour that it gets into a balance between the incoming alcohol going in water in this pipe right here, going in as the liquid, versus the vapor coming out.
Okay.
And so this runs in a balance. So there is no heads cut taken here either. Where there is a sort of a cut is indicated by this thermometer. Right now it's about 88 degrees. This runs typically at about 186, 183 degrees, somewhere right in about here. So we take and collect all the alcohol from here down, but we leave behind all the alcohol from here up. So from here up is effectively a tails cut.
The stuff the alcohol that's left that is too hot. I mean, that you would need too much energy to.
That's right. That is left in the pot. That is left in the doubler.
It's a really, so, you know, you explaining that in that way, even though it works somewhat like a pot still, I now understand why the guys in Kentucky are like, well, it's not a pot still, because it's really not. I mean, it's a single chamber continuous still of sorts. So yeah, that's really, really interesting. And Whiskey Badger is satisfied with the answer, so that's fabulous.
Thank you, Badger.
So, if you know me better, you know my spirit animal is the badger. So I have a great connection with our friend Whiskey Badger, and I'm glad he's here to ask those great questions. Like all my customers, they're very, very knowledgeable. I
want to show you one.
Go ahead.
I want to show you one more quick thing here, David. As long as I walk all over the place and waving it around like a maniac, just want to show you a couple of more very boring things. Look at what you people are wasting your Wednesday afternoon on, is a guy looking at stainless steel tanks. These are the gauge tanks, these two large tanks. They're actually not large at all. They are about 775, I think, gallon tanks. They are where the spirit goes after it comes off the still. So these are sized to hold only the output of one fermenter, right? So we distill the first fermenter and it goes in this tank. And we cut it and then it goes in the barrel and it goes away to the warehouse. The next fermenter, we distill that, and that usually goes in this tank. And it gets cut and it goes in the barrel, and that one goes off to the warehouse. The third one of the day, we distill it, it goes in this tank, it gets cut, it goes in a barrel, that goes to the warehouse. So what happens is that each batch, each fermenter is more or less discreetly barreled from the prior and the next one. It's not completely perfect and completely tight, because there is a little bit of
mingling.
A little bit of mingling in the beer well. That is the large tank holds the beer while it's being distilled. But to a large degree, each fermentation is barreled separately. And we know that's the case because we can taste it. We taste every, and 4 years later, we taste of the 12 or 13 barrels in a given lot, 12 to 14 barrels per fermenter. Each fermenter can be markedly different. One can be sweet, the next one's spicy. The next one, it needs to age a little bit longer. The next one is really dry. The next one's oaky. The next one is tastes like flowers, you know. It's because of, here's the beer well while we're at it. Beer well, 6,000 gallons. Empty.
Wow.
Fermenter goes in here and goes from here through the still. Anyway, moving right along. I wanted to show you those tanks because it is relevant to our discussion we will have shortly about your private barrels and about Riff single barrels and why they are special. Well, that was fun.
That was fun. That was perfect. Thank you.
Marvel, what we can do these days. I need a drink.
I'm with you, man. Should we hit the bottle and bond bourbon then?
Let's do it.
Or jump straight to a single barrel? I think it's really interesting that you guys have thought a way to do almost a batch, take a continuous process and create a batch sort of style for it.
Right.
Right.
You know, we didn't plan it that way. The way most distilleries operate, and this is a super smart way to operate, and everybody should do it this way. Most places have a way bigger spirit tank, gauge tank, or often they call it the cistern. And they distill a fermenter and it goes in the tank. They distill another fermenter and that goes in the tank. They distill 5 more fermenters, and every one of these fermenters is as big as your house. And they all go in the tank and they all get mixed together. And then they get cut and then they go in the barrel. So that's a smart way to run because it ameliorates the differences from fermenter to fermenter. And you have a much more uniform product going in the barrel and a much more uniform product coming out 4 years later. What we have to do at New Riff is when we go and bottle, as I was talking about earlier, we make a bottled batch. We make a bottling run of bottle and bond. We have to get material from many batches. I said there were about 25 barrels. We don't just take 2 batches of 12 barrels and put them together. We have to take 10 or 11 or 12 different batches, 2 or 3 barrels each, to get all those different characters and colors and flavors and styles that New Riff can express. Get all of that into a batch of bottle and bond. So you were asking earlier about consistency season to season. That's not really where the tail is wagging the dog, so to speak. Where we have a chance for, let's say, inconsistency is that we just have to be sure to get enough different lots in there, enough different batches. So, for example, when people come to pick out a private barrel, I urge them, don't take samples from the same day. Those could be from the same lot, and they're really going to be quite similar. So when we get to the single barrels, we can really get into comparing those. But as we were walking around, I wanted to take the opportunity to show you our very tiny, very unglamorous gauge tanks.
Well, I love it. I love it. It's a great, and it's an important part of the story. I'm really glad you did, because it really elucidates what we're doing here and why these single barrels can be so different. Because it's true, there is incredible consistency in some distilleries, and of course the warehouse is another big part about how your ultimate flavor profiles are gonna express themselves. What do your warehouses look like?
Well, we have a 5-story rick house. It holds about 18,000 barrels. But we've only been filling that since late 2017. And prior to that, the barrels sat on the floor in a single story. We built a stowe like they have in Scotland. Do I have a picture around here? I don't think I do. Sorry.
We'll Google it.
Yeah, a stowe is barrels on a level, pieces of timber that lie on top of the barrels, and more barrels on top of that. This is how you see them stored in a Scottish dunnage warehouse. And that's how we stored stuff for the first several years of our lives, actually. So these barrels spent their first few years on a single story, and after that have lived in a rick house.
Whiskey Badger again asked a quick question. What's the explanation for differences between ferments of the same mash, essentially, if you don't have a wooden washbacks? Of course, they're open tanks, so there's obviously some interaction with the air. But do you have a sort of an opinion? I mean, fermentation is such an important part of the process.
Sure. We certainly have open fermenters. For one thing, just as a side note on wood, and I can't comment on it directly because we've never had wood here. We always use stainless steel fermenters. Every one of the old time distillers I talk to says very point blank, there ain't no difference. Maybe there is a difference with something that's brand new, but what does go on, presuming you have open top fermenters, we believe open top fermenters are important. We encourage and allow for an expression of microflora, an individual thumbprint of microflora that exists here in the distillery I think that would soak into the wood. And even though wood is steam cleaned, just like our fermenters are steam sanitized, between fermentations, we steam out with a whole bunch of steam. It gets really hot in the summer. Steam the fermenter for a good half an hour. So there's a lot of sanitation that happens in there, and they do that in wood fermenters as well. It's much more to do with the fact that it is open top, and we do encourage this microflora. There are distillers who ferment in a closed top, and they add certain bacterial cultures, principally lactic acid bacteria, which is really what makes the sour mash be sour, is the action of that lactic acid bacteria. They control the fermentation so much that rather than allow native microflora and who knows what to be influencing the flavor, they close the fermenter and introduce a culture. And they do this in order to be consistent, but also in order to, they could pick that operation up and, to the very best of one's ability, replicate it somewhere else. Whereas here at New Riff, if we were even to have a distillery on the other side of town, running on the same water supply and the same yeast and the same corn and everything, you can never really clone and really duplicate what's going on there because of the microflora that is there. So that's principally where there is a variation. I cannot, however, Mr. Badger, I cannot definitively explain why there's a difference. You would think, well, maybe it's something to do with the time. And the one in the morning is one way and the one in the afternoon is always a different way. Nope, that's not it. Is it from, as we mentioned earlier, season to season, different things going on in the winter? Nope. It just is Mother Nature going on out there in that distillery.
It's the magic.
We do not know why each batch is different one to the next, but it is.
Great stuff.
That said, there are, of course,
bond
commonalities to all of our bourbons. We never have a bourbon that tastes, for example, like a wheated bourbon until we make a wheated bourbon, which we have. So yeah, here's the bottled in bond bourbon. Once again, bottled in bond without chill filtration. Do you know that in the bottled in bond regulations, the one thing that the government allows a producer to change, the spirit, the bottled in bond whiskey must be unaltered from its original condition coming out of the barrel, except that you add water to make it 100 proof. By any means, you can't add coloring or flavoring or anything, except for the one thing that they do allow for are things like filtration. The federal government, the regulations call it chill proofing, and that's their name for chill filtration. So bottled in bond whiskeys are allowed to be chill filtered. And isn't it interesting that the government recognizes that chill filtration will change a whiskey? Well, we don't even do that, right? This is taking bottled in bond and hopefully raising it to an even higher level than the regulations will allow. The grain bill here, 65% corn, 30% rye, 5% malted barley. This is a genuinely high rye bourbon at 30%. It's not the highest in the industry, but at double the industry average, I don't think anyone with a statement of this being a high rye bourbon.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that. And how many regular mash bills of bourbon are you distilling? I mean, this is the core, I assume, obviously, because it's in the bottle bond. But
right, this is the core. And aside from these specialty things, I mentioned earlier the heirloom corn that we're about to distill, and chocolate oatmeal stout bourbon that became winter whiskey. I mentioned we've made a wheated bourbon. We've made in the neighborhood of something like 47 different mash bills in our careers in total. But the core mash bill is only and ever this 30% rye. And in the case of the rye, this is New Riff rye. We don't make on a standard regular basis any other mash bill. There are distilleries that make maybe two mash bills and blend them together. That's cool. We've never done that. We found this one early on, and we liked it a lot.
And I do too. Delish. And so you're picking from a number of different lots to get a core sort of flavor profile that you believe represents, the best of what New Riff can offer, and that's going to be more or less consistent from batch to batch, and that. So it gives you a little bit of leeway there because you're able to pick from so many batches. The proof of entry into the barrel does change though, right? Do you have a couple of different barrel entry?
No, everything we've ever put away has been entered at 110.
Okay. Okay. Although, yeah, then you in some of the single barrels we see wide variations. I always assumed that was difference in proof entry. So you'll see some coming out at 52 and other ones going up. Is that just to do with warehousing or?
Right. It has to do with warehousing. Yes, I suppose there could be some variability in the barrel, but vastly more. The reason is where it's stored in the rick. And on the lower floors, they lose a little bit of proof, and on the upper floors, they gain a little bit. The strongest bourbon we ever bottled was we had one barrel that hit 115, and for a long time they were very typical at about 100, 111 to 113. So they can go up a little bit or go down a little bit.
But you're not having the same inconsistencies, maybe the same range of inconsistencies that you'd have as a big, warehouse at Heaven Hill or Beam, where it's 13,
Right.
15 floors high, where
No,
the top is
we don't see that.
baked and the bottom.
And by the way, may I add, I quite enjoy the proofs that our single barrels tend to live at. It's a very friendly barrel proof product. I've had, maybe you had experiences, David, of getting some shipments from Central Kentucky, barrel samples and things. I had one once sent by a very famous distillery. I think they were trying to kill me, and they were 18-year-old whiskeys, and they were delicious. They came in at 80 point, let's see, about 80.1% alcohol, over 160 proof. It's over the upper limit of what it could be distilled at. It's twice twice the legal minimum, 40%. So there are some ridiculously strong whiskeys out there, and we've all had single barrels that are barrel proof whiskeys that are 137 and a half and 132, or too strong to carry on an airplane. And I like those. I add water to them to drink them, just like I do this whiskey. But they're kind of obstreperous. It's hard to drink something like that straight and really take the measure of it. So if some people do like to drink a barrel proof product straight up, and more power to them, as long as it's ours. New Riff is a pretty friendly dram. It might be 112, 114 proof. You can drink that all day long without water if you so wish.
Well, and speaking of which, we've got these two samples here, and they both have quite different proofs. One's quite low, 51.95, and the other 56.75. Do you find? Should we start with the lower one, higher one? What's your preference?
Sure. Let's start with the lower one. I think it's 103.9 proof, barrel 16.3467. I have
the one I've got.
Quality control retainer, sample retain that we keep in the lab.
Very good.
Hey, maybe folks in the comment, if they have any of these, either of these barrels at home that they picked up from KNL, would like to chime in as well on their tasting notes and what they think of it. That would be cool.
Of course, these are actually for sale. We so often are tasting incredible bourbon. It's like so hard to get that.
Cool.
You can't even buy it, but these are for sale. And these barrels were selected by my colleague Andrew, I believe. And they're quite distinctive from each other, which I think is so much fun here. But tell us about what do you think about this, the lower proof one, this 3467?
Well, I think I will compare them, actually.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Maybe you'd like to as well, side by side.
Aye.
One of each. I must say the color of our whiskey, being unchill filtered, it retains everything that we like about a whiskey. Not just the aroma and the flavor, but also the texture, the mouthfeel is unattenuated and everything is in there. And also the color is unaltered. Our whiskey at 4 years old, bottled in bond, is darker than another distiller's 6-year bottled in bond, because theirs is chill and ours is not.
I can't believe the industry is just they're sticking with the trope that chill filtration doesn't do anything. They can't. I respect the guys who chill filter and admit that it changes, and just say that we do it because we care about,
there's a place for it.
cloudiness.
To be fair,
Sure.
is there a place for 80 proof bourbon and 90 proof bourbon? Sure. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone wants something that drinks at this strength or cost what a more expensive bottle does. Certainly from the point of view of the profit of the producer, they enjoy adding water, which is the real reason that they chill filter. I just like to see more and more distilleries making more and more unchill filtered expressions, and most of all to see distilleries like New Riff that commit to it across the board.
Wow. So on the 3, 4, 6, 7, I get a lot more sort of bright stone fruit. There is that tiny little, sometimes you get that tiny little like tomato leaf greenness to it, which I kind of love. It's subtle savory quality to it. Tiny backbone of pepper as well.
I see your fruit note, and I note that the stronger is a little bit more oaky, a little bit more wiry, even though at the same time it's bigger. I get a little more confection also out of 3, 4, 6, 7. But let's see what happens with a little water.
Yeah, 3, 4, 6, 7 has kind of a bit of that tea note, that like maybe sweet tea thing. Some hints of kind of tobacco-y.
Yeah, it really does now. I attribute that, and I find it all the time in our rye whiskey, to the rye. There's a leafy quality, a grassiness, say earthiness, but that's not really, in my opinion, accurate. It's not really earth derived. It's reminding me that rye is really just a grass. Rye. Sometimes there's varieties of rye that are planted as grasses, and they grow like a tall grass on the side of the road or something like that. That's not the rye, but it's a member of the grass family. This sort of leafy grassiness can sometimes come out. I rather like it.
It's got good backbone of spice. Doesn't gives you a little bit of that cinnamony spice on the back end, which I really like. There's a savory quality though. There's that grassy note, which I think is really interesting. It balances out that sweetness, that sweet fruity confection thing really nicely. Man, they are very different though. No question about that.
The stronger one, 3325. A word I use sometimes in my tasting notes is classic, by which I mean not that it's a classic bourbon, but it's classically styled. It has the framework, reminds me of the bourbons we all grew up drinking. Yeah. It's classically referenced, and we definitely get a vibe of that off of 3325, and that happens frequently in New Riff whiskeys. It is, however, classic high rye. It doesn't taste like a low rye whiskey.
No, it's got some oomph for sure.
A little bit of a rooty quality in here, like licorice root. I don't mean licorice like anise or star anise or absinthe, but the root of it. And even example is roots like sassafras, or sort of root beer flavors. Some of those rooty derived things. That's going on in the stronger one, 3325.
Yeah, a lot of that dark barky root stuff. Like if you've ever chewed on
sarsaparilla.
Yeah. Someone's asking why I spit it out. I have to pick up my kid in an hour, and it's not encouraged to drink in advance of that. But I've had my little sipper here or there. Any 6-year picks coming out? Oh gosh, what a great question.
No. Hey, I saw earlier somebody asked, was 6-year-old malted rye coming to California? Yes, it will, in small amounts in the fall, in the fourth quarter. David, we will get some of that out to almost all of our distribution network. We
Great.
make malted rye very sporadically in the early days, and now we make it a lot more of it, and we make it every month. But we didn't have a lot to begin with, so the first batch that is getting released this week is only for sale in Kentucky, our home market, and in our gift shop as well. And we won't have more until the fall. But come October, there should be a release. It'll probably get to you by November, and then thereafter there will probably be a release more or less quarterly of malted rye. As to your old barrel picks, no, we do not have anything like the quantity of older product, even though we hold back about 30% of our product every year to become older. We're not sure how much older. It could be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. But even with holding that back, we do not have anything like the supply to allow everybody that ought to get one, such as K&L, for example, to be able to get one. If I gave one to K&L, they'd hang me across the street. And if I gave Party Source, the people in Louisville would come after us with pitchforks. So it's going to be a long time, probably never. That will, at least, I'll be retired by the time we have the ability to have private 6-year-old stuff.
Well, and that's the tricky thing about these things. I mean, it's, you can't make everybody happy, so it's sometimes better to make nobody happy.
Same thing goes for rye private barrel picks. However, I think the timeline on that is going to be shorter than never. I don't know when we will get to private rye, but we will get there.
Great. Well, yeah, those single barrel ryes can be, I mean, the one we have in stock right now is just cracking at cask strength ryes and just bombs.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I like everything you do, Jay. And I'm sad I haven't visited the distillery, and I'm planning to. My, our sales manager and our manager in Los Angeles is from right around the corner. He shopped at Party Source his entire life. He's back in June. And I think maybe if we have time, we should get him to pick a barrel for us, because he's a good old Kentucky boy and he knows his stuff. So that might be the first of many trips to the distillery. If you've got availability for us, it'll be our first SoCal pick, and then as soon as they let us, we're coming out to see you. So
we'll see. There's a long queue to get in, so to speak.
Sure.
Definitely, we will keep and our good partners, well supplied with private picks. So this is a very nice comparison, I think. A great example of how markedly different two lots can be, and it's not just from the proof. I can tell the difference in proof here. They do drink differently that way, but really the character and the flavor is what's different. It's a fascinating exercise to sit down here with a glass of each that come from two different lots and see how very different they can be.
So someone's asking which is the oaky apple pie flavor. None of them are particularly appley. They both have plenty of oak and spice. I'd say probably go 3, 4, 6, 7 if that's what you're looking for. It doesn't have that. It's a little prettier, I think.
I would agree.
Not as robust. But hard to say. They're both opening with air really nicely.
I get a little more confection out of 3, 4, 6, 7, the lower proof one, and that always helps communicate qualities like apple pie and pastry and baked goods and stuff like that. I wouldn't call it a sugar bomb. It's not, caramel and toffee and molasses and treacle and things like that. But it does have a sort of baked goods quality. I don't know that I find apple specifically, but there is a fruitiness, as you alluded to earlier, David.
Well, lovely. Yeah, we can't get enough of these. This is so fun. Finally, I've kept you so long here, I feel bad. We have the Kentucky gin. Why not finish the day with a bit of gin,
Thank you. Indeed, let's do it. So this is our Kentucky Wild Gin. as you mentioned. We are tasting today the barrel-aged variant. Of course, there is also an unaged version. These gins are multiple award winners at San Francisco World Spirits Competition. The first year we entered that competition, 2019, our whiskeys had been out for, a matter of about 5 months. And we sent everything off to San Francisco World Spirits Competition, the highest competition in the world, probably. For many people, it's the only one that matters. And back then, they awarded silver medals and gold medals. And if all the judges of a product thought it was a gold medal, then it got the double gold medal. And that first year, our entire portfolio, bourbon and rye and single barrel bourbon, we didn't make single barrel rye yet, and both gins, so 5 products, the entire portfolio rang up double gold. Absolutely unprecedented achievement for probably any distillery. Their entire portfolio wins it, let alone a young new distillery competing there for the first time. This is the rookie winning the World Series with slam in the bottom of the 9th for the Reds, not the damn Dodgers.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, this, I'm proud to say, won not only a double gold that year, but it won best in class. So for 1 year, we had the world's best barrel-aged gin. I'm proud to say also that our ordinary gin, our unaged variant, picked up a double gold medal in this year's San Francisco World Spirits Competition. So
great.
It warms my heart that people like our gin too so much, because I'm the gin maker. Actually, this is my recipe. A botanical load and a range of techniques that I came up with back in 2014 when we needed a gin to have a product we could sell right away. So this is our barrel-aged version. This spends 7 months in New Riff bourbon and rye barrels, and is bottled without chill filtration, of course, at 94 proof.
Great.
Has this lovely little color like this.
Yeah.
I want to tell you why it's called wild. There's a subset today of gins being made around the world. Some people call them terroir gins, or in Australia they call them bush gins because they go into the bush, and what they do is collect wild botanicals. There's a fantastic gin made by our friends at Bruichladdich called Botanist. You know it well.
Yes.
They hunt around the island and they pull out mugworts and lichens and gorse and something like 20 different things from the island of Isla. And I know those folks, and I did a stage out there in 2012 getting ready for New Riff, and I love Bruichladdich. They were a big influence on me and how I thought a distillery ought to be run. And I'm there learning about this gin, and I think, damn it, here's a whiskey region. They've got a gin. Why doesn't Kentucky have a gin from their wilds and their swamps and so on? And so I wanted to make a gin that was from here, from Kentucky, from the Ohio Valley where we live. And I found it. I found it big time. So it turns out that we have, and I have these botanicals here with me. There are 12 botanicals in the gins, but 2 of them, and 10 of them are worldwide renowned, famous: juniper, coriander, angelica root, etc., orris root, 3 kinds of citrus. But it turns out, and I don't know how this will translate in Instagram either, but here is a local juniper berry.
Wow.
Turns out we have juniper growing thick as thieves all over the Ohio Valley. It's called the Eastern Red Cedar. And it's actually the only native coniferous tree to the Ohio Valley. It is a juniper species. It is Juniperus virginiana. And in fact, years after making this gin, I ran across a distilling text from 1819 that described and laid out how a whiskey distiller at that time could pick the local berries and make this gin. Basically, the text was saying, hey, you don't have to go to Holland to get your juniper berries. You've got them in your backyard.
Wow.
And Kentucky distillers have known about this juniper tree, the local juniper tree, for 200 years. When I went looking for a wild gin made from Kentucky, I found the same thing. And then I also put in another, maybe even more unique thing. It's called the American Spice Bush. And this is very cool. This puts off, it's a bush. I see them all the time when I go hiking in the woods with my kid. It puts off this little berry, like a football. And it's called the American spice bush. Sometimes it's called American allspice because it has an aroma a lot like allspice. American allspice, it's sometimes called. This is an ancient seasoning. I have some here, you see. An ancient seasoning in the Ohio Valley. The settlers ate this stuff in times of famine. This was used in Civil War kitchens when they couldn't get spices and pepper. This was eaten for thousands of years by Native Americans. I have seen reference to historical reference from recordings hundreds of years ago from the Cherokee use it literally when they cook possum. Was the recipe or the reference in these tracts and these early botanicals.
That's wild.
So spice bush goes in this, and I don't mean I put in a tablespoon. There's about 4 pounds of both of these things that go into the gin, and in fact, these are our most expensive botanicals. I have to pay local hardworking farmers to go in the woods, climb the trees, pick them out by hand, literally wild forage them. They are more expensive than orris, more expensive than angelica root, thing we put in the gin. And I hope by dint of all this that we make a gin that is truly Kentucky and wild, truly capturing the flavor of our little corner of the world. You guys out there in California, you can go make your local gin.
We do.
St. George comes to mind. They call it terroir gin. You know, Lance there makes a version, a kind of gin like that. So my opinion is anywhere you live in the world, possibly excepting Antarctica, and I'm not even sure of that, anywhere you live, you could find something there to make a gin with that could go into a gin and help express your native region. And here, finally, Kentucky Great Whiskey Region has an award-winning gin that, like I said, comes from here, comes from where we live. So to flavor, this has a generous body, I think. I like to do 2 favorite cocktails with this. It's actually pretty good to sip straight.
Really is.
One of them is the Martinez. Of course, that's a Manhattan made with gin and is contemporaneous to the Manhattan. You just make a perfect Manhattan, but swap in the gin for whiskey. And when you use a barrel-aged gin in a martini, a Martinez, does a very interesting thing. You've pulled out the whiskey, and that's gone. But now you have returned to the drink a little bit of the vanilla, a little bit of the barrel that came away when you swapped it out for gin. So if you make a Martinez with a non-barrel aged gin, and that's a very nice drink, especially if you make it with ours. But when you make it with barrel aged gin, you have a really fascinating cocktail because now you're kind of blurring the lines between what the hell am I drinking here? Is this? Yeah, I thought I ordered a Martinez, and you bring me a Manhattan. No, it blurs the lines between is this a gin drink or a whiskey cocktail or whatever. The other favorite drink I make with this is the even simpler. You ready? I'm going to lay it on you. It's called the gin cocktail. It's an old fashioned. It's an old in 1806 when we have that reference to the word cocktail in print. The famous New York. You hear about this at Tales of the Cocktail from all the bartenders. The newspaper in New York that mentions a cocktail, and they describe a recipe that is simply an old fashioned. So if you went into a bar in 1806 and you said, "Barkeep, I'd like a gin cocktail," they would bring you gin, water, bitters, and sugar. And in the modern day, they would add ice. That's a gin old fashioned. My 2 favorite gins to make a gin old fashioned or a gin cocktail with are Genever. Try it with a Genever someday. And this thing is, dare I say, a wicked good gin cocktail.
I believe it.
What I personally don't use it for, ironically enough, because one of the reasons I made this gin in the first place is I was raised by a gin lover. My dad is a martini man. Made something like 39,000 martinis since 1958. He raised me right. He raised me to drink martini. And a martini is still to this day my favorite cocktail. I drink one almost every night. I don't like this all that much in a martini, but I think it makes wicked good Martinezes and a really good gin cocktail. So those are two things when people ask, well, what do I do with this? I like it, but what kind of cocktails? Martinez and a gin cocktail. And if you want to make a winter tonic, make a tonic syrup out of your own quinine powder, then that is really cool too. Find out there.
Well, and of course it straddles that line. I mean, it's not one of these gins you could mistake for whiskey, you know, that are occasionally out there, but it does straddle that line, and that's why it's working so well in these types of cocktails that also straddle the line. Well, this has been spectacular, Jay. It's such a pleasure to see you, even virtually, and we're so grateful for all you do for the store and for the industry and our customers, and I just can't wait to be out there. I'm going to send Ilya over. If you can't pick up a barrel, but at least we'll get him a tour of the place and take some pictures and snap a shot for the Instagram. So I'll coordinate that. And, you know, can't wait to get out there. I guess we still have about 30 people hanging on here. So any questions for Jay before we let him go, guys? Whiskey Badger, you've done some great work today. We appreciate you as always.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Badger. Looks like everybody's happy and satiated with the wonderful conversation we've had, Jay. And I do so appreciate your time and incredible expertise. Very few people that I can look to for answers in this industry, and you're one of them. So I really appreciate that. And we'll see you soon. All right, Jay?
Thanks, David. I hope to be out there myself later this year. We'll see.
Yeah, let me know. We'll go out.
You bet, buddy. Take care.
Cheers. Be well, brother.